My dear brothers, respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We mentioned that two of the most destructive forces that have taken so many souls throughout history are, number one, the love of money, the love of wealth, the desire to accumulate more and more material possessions, which is an entire subject for another time. And the second is what we focused on last night, which is the desire to be recognized, the innate and intrinsic need for validation, for respect, for attention, for people to express their love and adoration and approval for us and our actions and our lifestyles and so on. These two traits we mentioned are healthy in moderation. It's a good thing that a person would want to work, earn a living, make money, and ensure that those under his duty of care live as comfortably as possible. Without this desire, people would stop working. People wouldn't bother exerting much effort in the way of earning an honest life, putting food on the table. So in moderation, this is a crucial trait to possess. And I'm sure many of you have had the experience where if you come across as goofing off, as being lazy, as not putting in the effort to study, which is an introduction to getting a job, at least in today's mindset, then your parents would be quick to remind you that this is not how it works and that you need to get out there. You need to work. And if you happen to be in the situation where you're married and you're goofing off and you're being lazy and you're oversleeping and whatnot, then it'll be your wife who tells you that, or sometimes vice versa. The point is that in moderation and to a certain degree, this is a God-given innate desire. And so it shouldn't be ignored, it shouldn't be quelled, it shouldn't be dismissed. However, the problem comes to the surface when this desire is left unchecked. When a person's sole purpose in life becomes the accumulation of money. When money in and of itself becomes an end as opposed to a means to other ends, right? It's having money in itself that you begin to enjoy. And that pleasure that you gain from having money and having material possessions falls into excess. And you fall into extravagance and wastefulness and overworking and experiencing the anxiety and stress associated with a person who's now labeled a workaholic, right? And so you need to create a balance. You need to be able to temper this desire. You need to keep it in check. You need to weaken the attachment that you have towards money by giving more of it away. This is something that Islam teaches us, that if you want your money to grow while simultaneously not falling prey to the trap of an endless rat race that is the pursuit of money and wealth, you need to give more of it away. You need to give part of it towards the poor, the hungry, those who are less privileged. And sometimes this comes in the form of religious obligations like khums and zakat. Other times, it's beyond these obligations. It's about simply helping those who are in need without thinking, oh, I've already paid my zakat, I've paid my khums. Rather, you need to think about the fact that beyond the concept of wajib, there is a responsibility, a social burden that each of us carries. And so the more money you have, the more you are required to and encouraged to give in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is why traditions tell us, and listen to this, it's quite interesting, that one of the things that allows the stupor of death, you know what the stupor of death is? In Arabic we refer to it as sakratul maut. وَجَاءَتْ sakratul maut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran, ذَلِكَ مَا كُنْتَ عَنْهُ تَحِيدٌ. The stupor of death is the moment when our souls are being extracted from the body, which is an incredibly, mind-bendingly, unfathomably painful and difficult moment in the life of a human being when you're transitioning from one world into the next. More painful, in fact, than a person being born. We often, perhaps because of the trauma associated with childbirth, or because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His mercy, has chosen to make us forget that transition. But for whatever reason, we don't remember what we went through. If we could remember, and we could deduce this simply by looking at a child who's just born, right? A child never cries until the moment of birth. So imagine what they go through, as well as the mother, of course. And so that is a very, very painful transition that takes place from one world to another, from one physical realm to another. Now imagine you're leaving this dunya to enter the afterlife, to enter an entirely different world that is perhaps on a different dimension. And so the tradition tells us that one of the things that allows this process to be easier, more palatable, less painful, is to give sadaqah in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My explanation, and I could be wrong, but the way I interpret this hadith is to say that the more you give sadaqah in this dunya, the less attached you will be to those material possessions. And one of the things that makes the transition from the dunya to the akhirah so difficult is the amount of attachments we've built, the web of connections and attachments that we've created with everything that we own. And a common example that I usually give is, imagine if you lost your shoes. How upset would you be? Even though your shoes might be what, 40, 50 worth? Now imagine you lose your phone, which is worth about 1,000 plus. It's painful, it hurts. Now imagine not losing your shoes or your phone or your purse or your clothes or your favorite jacket or anything like that, or your car or your house, but losing everything. You've worked your entire life to acquire, to build, and suddenly you have to say goodbye to all of that. How painful do you think that'll be? One of the ways you make that less painful is by giving in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you give, the less attachments, therefore the easier the transition. Anyway, so this is one intrinsic need and desire that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in all of us, but it needs to be kept in check, and that's one of the ways you do that. The second, we said, as per the hadith of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, is the love of fame, the love of being the center of attention, the love of being adored and respected and honored by those around you and by society at large. Now, what social media has done is that it's globalized the pool that people now expect the adoration, the respect, the honor, the validation, the recognition to come from. So back in the day, we live in small villages, lands that are vast and sparsely populated, and so the pool of people that you want to show you respect is what? 50 individuals, 60, 70, 100. Now, we're exposed to millions of people out there. And so, if 100 people validate my actions on by commenting or liking my social media posts, that's never enough. Why? because I see those who have millions of followers, and they become my role models. They become the individuals that I aspire to be like. And so for me to have 100 is not enough, to have 1,000 is not enough. That's why you have so many videos and instructions and tutorials telling you how to grow your social media following. You need more and more and more. And it becomes like an insatiable beast that is never satisfied, never content with what it has. Even if you have 1 million followers, they'll still come online and say, smash that like button, subscribe to my channel. But you've got 1 million people who devote their time and their attention to whatever it is you're quote unquote creating, but it's not enough. If they have 10 million, they'll still beg for your attention. They'll still crave your validation. If they have 100 million, there's always more that they crave, because it's an insatiable beast. Because it's like a black hole. No matter how much energy, no matter how much matter, no matter how much light you feed into it, it always wants more. In fact, it wants even more the more you give it. And so this desire, as we said, is a healthy one, as long as you keep it in check, as long as you tame it, as long as you use it for the purpose it was given to you, which is what? Which is self-respect. You want people's attention and respect and adoration, because without it, people would commit ungodly acts. They would behave in a way that is deemed stupid and dumb and unacceptable and awkward, right? And so because you crave people's respect and sort of honor and love, you act in a manner that is reasonable. Reasonable in the sense that it stems from your sense of self-respect. You're self-conscious. You've probably come across people who are too self-conscious. They're always thinking that everybody's judging me, right? Even that behavior, even that character trait is good to a degree. It's good that you want to feel that you're being judged by people, which can become an inhibition against unacceptable, awkward, sinful, criminal acts. That's why when many criminals conduct their business, when they commit their acts of transgression and civil disobedience, they do so in private. That's why they have two personas. They are good people in the public eye, and they try to maintain that facade as much as humanly possible. But in private, they commit whatever their heart desires. Why do they do that? It's because they want people to respect them. They don't want to lose that sense of self-respect. Even though sometimes it gets to the point where people lose their sense of self-respect. They start acting in a way that tells you and reveals the fact that they don't care how people judge them. They don't care what people say to them. In fact, we have a hadith that say that the worst of people is who? مَنْ لَا يُبَالِي مَا قَالْ وَمَا قِيلَ لَهُ. The one who doesn't care what they say and what others say about them. There are some examples which I don't know if they're appropriate to mention, but because we have a hadith about this. For instance, we have a hadith that says that the people of Lut, the people of Sodom, Lut is a reference to the Prophet. Sodom is the name of the city, the village that they inhabited. So the biblical Sodom and the people of Lut, according to the Holy Quran, they would engage in behavior amongst themselves that we would deem detestable and grotesque. But for them it was normal. For example, they would pass wind in public. I used to think about this. Why is this a character trait that the people of Lot had, the Sodomites had, and that would somehow be linked back to their behavior, which led to their destruction and to God's chastisement to be sent upon them. I think that it's because when you don't care what you do or say in public, no matter how detestable it might be, it gets to the point, that insatiable beast will reach a point where they literally don't care about any kind of behavior, no matter how many red lines they have to cross. You see where I'm coming from? So it starts off with something simple, like passing wind, which, subhanAllah, nowadays, in many societies, this has become normal. And some people might say, well, so what? Some people even laugh at it. When they see somebody do this, it becomes laughing stock. It becomes a means of, oh, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? The smell, the odor. But really, if you go down to the core, it's a case of this person not possessing self-respect. It means that they're doing things that they do not fear or feel embarrassed about the consequences of those actions. And when they stop feeling embarrassed about those actions, they will do more grave and more heinous and more disgusting things, and they don't fear the consequences or feel embarrassed about what others might say or do. And it even gets to the point where they feel proud about it. They'll say, this is who I am. Deal with it. I'm proud of who I am and what I'm doing. So it starts off with something as seemingly trivial, but it gets to something that is truly heinous. And so the point here, in a nutshell, is that these desires are good in themselves, as long as they're kept in check, as long as they don't get out of control. When they get out of control, it becomes another problem that needs to be dealt with. And I mentioned yesterday, and obviously my audience is made up of honorable men, wonderful, honorable sisters. May Allah bless you all for honoring Fatimatu Zahra and honoring Imam Hussain and honoring Imam Sajjad and Lady Zainab alayhim as-salam by merely showing up and coming to the majlis and perhaps even shedding a tear for the ultimate tragedy. I mentioned a few examples, and one of them was the problem of what is happening in the social media sphere nowadays. And this problem isn't restricted to the sisters, but I think in the case of our respected sisters, it's more palpable, it's more visible. It's easier to see that a line has been crossed. With the men, because we're dealing with something that, again, if we address the haram elements, then it's easier to tell that this sister is committing haram by revealing herself and by beautifying herself and by doing things that our scholars have clearly and unambiguously declared as being unlawful and illicit. It's a lot easier to tell. But if we go beyond haram and halal, if we go to an area that we might call behavior that is deemed acceptable by the imam of the time, then it's a lot easier to identify faults and flaws and problems, whether it be among the brothers or the sisters. And while I won't judge their intentions, and I'll say, you know what, they're not doing it to, to satisfy some primal urge for attention, and they're actually trying to draw attention to Imam Hussain alayhi salam rather than themselves, right? Maybe that is their intention. But the process and the end result is one that is clearly unlawful. It is clearly haram. And, we can address this problem either by using the most soothing tone, or we could go out and smash this idol with brutal force. But the end is the same. We're dealing with actions that are taking place in order to serve Imam Hussain, but in fact keep twisting the dagger in his heart. And so we need to take a moment, we need to pause, take a step back and think about our actions, think about why we're doing this. Are we satisfying those urges? Are we feeding this insatiable beast? Are we satisfying the Imam of our time, or allowing the shaitan to celebrate that I even use the name of Hussein in order to tarnish the legacy of Hussein? Which is it? When a sister goes out and wears lipstick, let me try and zoom in on this a little bit. Do you know why women wear lipstick? How did this come about? Do you know why? The origin of red lipstick, which is the standard color, obviously it comes in a million shades that I couldn't care to know about, but the origin of lipstick is this. Your lips have a layer of skin that is very, very thin, which is why the redness in the lips doesn't come from a form of pigmentation. It's not that the skin is red, rather you can see the actual blood vessels. In other words, the redness of the lips come from blood. Now, when a woman's desire, this also applies to the men to a lesser degree, but mostly to the women. You know how when people get embarrassed or they fall in love, what do they say? They say you're blushing. Why do they say you're blushing? You're blushing meaning your lips and your cheeks turn red. Why does that happen? Because your heart races, or if you're embarrassed, this happens as well. Your heart races, the blood circulation increases, and there's a swelling that takes place in the tiny blood vessels. They swell up because of the increased rush of blood, right? That's why it's called a blush. What happens to the lips is that when a woman's desire and libido increases, the lips become a brighter shade of red because of the increase in blood flow in the lips. And so the lipstick was invented in order to highlight that this woman's desire is now at an elevated level. In other words, the idea behind it was that you might say it's beautiful. Of course it's beautiful, but why? If you ask evolutionary scientists, right? Not that I agree with everything they say, but at least this scientific phenomenon is pretty clear. They say that when a woman's lips become more red, a man's desire is reciprocated and increases, given the fact that he now feels this woman is in a heightened state of desire and ready for him to satisfy his desire. This is basically what it is. Now, a woman who puts on lipstick, because there are two forms of cosmetics, at least as far as I know, and I'm no expert. There is one kind of cosmetics that's designed to hide the blemishes, right? You have, blemishes on your face. There are imperfections, whatever. That's why people usually start with a foundation of some kind. It hides the blemishes. But then you have something like mascara and lipstick and so on. That's not designed to hide blemishes. That's designed to alert those in whose circle we happen to be in, those who are observing us, those who are looking at us, that I am ready. My desire has now increased. My libido has increased. Do you understand what that means? So when a woman puts on lipstick and either goes out into the streets or to the workplace or to school or on social media, speaking about Lady Zainab no less, speaking about Imam Hussain no less, or to the shrine of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, what is she actually signaling to all the men watching her? What is she signaling to them? That I'm ready. My desire is now at a level where we can perhaps satisfy it in some form or fashion. Even though she might be at home. She's not consciously making this declaration, but that's what the observer sees and feels. That's the signal that she's giving off. Let me give you an example. So the other day we had this program, the Imam Hussain conference. One of the sisters, may Allah bless her, asked a question about women's visibility and so on. So I had a very brief discussion about it. But one example came to my mind which I'd like to share with you. Imagine you have a 5-year-old son or a 6-year-old daughter, just a young child. And you know that there is a gathering of men in a park where one of those men is a pedophile. Now, you don't need to have absolute certainty that this individual is a predator of the worst caliber, a pedophile, someone who desires children for pleasure. Would you even set foot in that park with your child? You wouldn't, would you? Absolutely not. Would someone say that, oh, well, it's a public place, so it's okay? And out of the 100, there's only one who happened to be in Epstein's island. Not all of them, but just this one guy. So he's not going to do anything. He won't be able to do anything. Would you set foot in that park, knowing that this person might take one glance in that way toward your son or daughter? I don't think there's anybody here or anybody watching or listening to this who would say, yeah, I do it, I don't care. Now, let's flip this around. You as an adult woman, go out there and there's 100 people. Again, let's take the social media example so people don't tell me, oh, you want women to stay at home. I'm not saying that. Social media. The makeup is used, the cosmetics are used. Then the person goes in front of the camera, films herself, posts it. I'm going to go on a limb and say that out of the 100 men who sees that video, because you've really put in a lot of effort to make yourself look presentable and beautiful and attractive. I know the hijab's there. I know it covers every strand of hair. But what about everything else? Out of 100 men who watch that, 90, I won't say 99, I won't say 100, 90 of them will look at you in that way. Why is this okay and acceptable, knowing that there's going to be people who see you with lust, who will look at you with desire? Why is this acceptable? Why is this okay? Why are you objectifying yourself? Why are you putting yourself in a position where you're vulnerable? And again, I'm not talking about being physically vulnerable. Obviously, behind a camera, no one even knows where you live. That's not the point. Even if the pedophile couldn't touch your son, simply by glancing at him, by looking at him, you wouldn't want someone to do this. And so, this is what the desire for validation and recognition and respect and honor has done to us. This is where we are. And somehow, because we talk about Imam Hussain and Lady Zainab and Amir al-Mu'mineen and so on, it's deemed acceptable. Not only will the men cheer for this, but also the women. And all the comments are like, wow, you're so beautiful, you're such an inspiration. The messaging is inspirational, yes, but the way it's presented is extremely problematic. Wallahi, Imam Hussain is not pleased with this. I don't know how else to say it. And I'm saying it, God is my witness, from a place of love and respect. shaitan knows how to tap into this desire. Let me give you an example and then mention a couple of hadith. And get to the actual crux of what I'm trying to get to. The evil tyrant Muawiyah wanted to wage war against Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now, he was an incredibly cunning, conniving beast, but he was up against a giant like Ali ibn Abi Talib. So he needed to get as much help from his cronies as possible. And so he sends a message to Amr ibn al-As. And he says to him in the letter that I'd like you to join me because I want to fight Ali ibn Abi Talib. You're someone with very kind of deceiving mindset. You understand diplomacy and negotiations, and you know how to play the game. So I'd like you to join me. Amr ibn al-As responds to Muawiyah with a letter that was basically a poem in which he praises Amir al-Mu'mineen and mentions the virtues of Ali ibn Abi Talib and lists so many virtues that many Shia couldn't list. I don't know if that sunk in. Amr ibn al-As listed more virtues than the average Shia knows about Amir al-Mu'mineen. Basically, he was trying to increase the price tag. Right? He's telling Muawiyah, look, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to go against Ali ibn Abi Talib, then I'm not content with just the title of being your advisor. I want something more meaningful. Muawiyah knew what Amr ibn al-As wanted. He knew his price. So he told him, you know what? You will get the governorship of Egypt now. At some point, Amr ibn al-As had tasted the governorship of Egypt. He was obsessed with Egypt, and particularly Egyptian women. In the time of the second Khalifa, who appointed him there for a short period of time. Then when the third Khalifa came, he got rid of all the old guards, and he appointed his half-brother as the governor of Egypt. So he removed Amr ibn al-As, and Amr was always obsessed with Egypt. So Muawiyah told him, I'll let you rule over Egypt, and you can do whatever you want. So Amr at this point came to his two sons. He had two adult children, Abdullah and Ubaydullah, if I'm not mistaken. And he asked them for advice. He said to them, what do you think I should do? One of the sons told him, listen, you're an old man, and you also have plenty of money to live out the rest of your life in comfort and ease. You really don't want to get mired with all of this. You don't want to be involved in this. Right? You're going up against Ali ibn Abi Talib. Not only is he the one that you describe in your poetry, but Ali is the sitting Khalifa, right? It's too risky. It's not worth it. It's not worth it for this dunya or the akhirah. Then the second son rose. He said to him, listen, if there's going to be a war that breaks out between Ali and Muawiyah, you have to be involved in this war, one way or another, with one side or the other. Why? Because this is big. This is legacy-defining events. And if you don't get involved in some capacity, then you will be delegated to the footnote of history. No one's going to recognize you. You won't be able to leave a lasting legacy. People won't remember who the hell Amr ibn al-As was. And so you have to get involved. Now, if you must get involved, which I think you do, he said, if you go with Ali ibn Abi Talib, the problem is, Ali ibn Abi Talib, in terms of his physical strength, in terms of his intellectual prowess, in terms of all of these things, he doesn't need someone like you. Because hello, it's Ali we're talking about. And in terms of the dunya, Ali ibn Abi Talib is a just ruler. He's not just going to splurge and give you this land and this region and so on. So you're not going to get much from Ali ibn Abi Talib, but you're not going to give him much either. As for Muawiyah, you can really up the ante there. there is room for great profit. And you will enjoy yourself because Muawiyah is going to give you a lot in return for your loyalty. In other words, his son tapped into both of these desires. The love for wealth and money, and the love for fame, legacy, respect. So Muawiyah decides to take his son's advice, the second one. He packs up, rides his camel, goes out with his servant. They leave the city of Medina, they reach a crossroads. The servant looks up at his master, at Amr ibn al-As. He said to him, listen, we're on a crossroad right now. If we take this road to the left, we're going to go to Kufa. And Kufa is where Ali ibn Abi Talib is. And while there's not much in the way of pleasures and women and whatnot, but that's Ali ibn Abi Talib, so your paradise is pretty much guaranteed. But if you head in the other direction, you're going to go to Sham, where you know you're going to lose your akhirah and your afterlife. And every once in a while, brothers and sisters, no matter how much we try to dim the light of our intellect and mute the sound of our conscience, it comes back to present the facts in the clearest possible form. At this point, Amr ibn al-As saw himself in the same exact position as Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, but made the opposite choice. He looked at his slave. He said to him, take us to Sham, where I will set foot in the fires of hell with my own 2 feet. I know exactly what I'm doing, but let's go. And sure enough, as they say, the rest is history. This is why it's important, brothers and sisters, to keep these desires in check. We have a hadith from the Holy Prophet, for instance, who says that a person who craves people's attention, the Prophet says that hypocrisy grows in the heart of those who crave attention and respect from others the way a legume or a bush bean or mushrooms grow, which means they don't need much, right? You put a bean in a cup in the kitchen, give it a little bit of moisture, a little bit of soil, and before you know it, it grows into a semi-tree. Same with mushrooms in the jungle, same with all of these things. In other words, that love for other people's validation and recognition makes hypocrites out of us. Why? I think the explanation is quite simple. It's because when I crave people's validation, I will only do the things that they respect me for, and therefore turn into a hypocrite. I will only show the areas in my life that get all the likes and that get all the positive comments, and hide everything else. All the nasty stuff, all the ugly stuff gets hidden and buried. But they're not going away, they're not being cleansed. And so it grows hypocrisy inside of you. That's one hadith. Another hadith, Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam says that, the worst thing a person can do is to enjoy the flapping of sandals and shoes behind them, which means having a posse, having an entourage, right? Having a group of people that always accompany them wherever they go. And by the way, this is not exclusive to celebrities and actors and A-listers and social media influencers and whatnot. Sometimes it could happen to me as a speaker, where I feel it's inadequate, it's disrespectful, it's not honorable enough for me to just walk into the majlis by my own. And so I try to gather a few people and then say, let's walk in together, right? This is dangerous. Amirul Mu'mineen, alayhi salawatullah, wal malaika wal nas ajma'een. One day he's walking in the middle of the night and he hears a group of people behind him. So he stops, he's like, what do you want? It was Maytham al-Tammar, Malik al-Ashtar, some of his closest confidants. The Imam says to them, what do you want? They said, nothing, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. We saw you walking in the dead of night, and so we wanted to make sure you're safe. We want to look after you. The Imam said, don't. فَإِنِّي أُبْغِضُ خَفْقَ النَّعْلِ مِنْ خَلْفِي. I hate to hear people walking behind me. hearing those shoes behind me, having an entourage that walks with me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despises this because it feeds that beast, makes me feel self-important. And conversely, subhanallah, we have multiple ahadith, some of which I referenced, but perhaps not in this series during the first 10 nights of Muharram, where Imam Sadiq alayhi salam describes the companions of the 12th Imam. That's who we aspire to be, right? The Imam says, listen to this. He says, if you could live out your life in a way where nobody knows you and you're not recognized, then do so. Faf'al. That's how dangerous the craving for fame is. The Imam says, إِذَا كَانَ 313 when the 313, the number has been reached, and we have this group of people who are the lieutenants of the 12th Imam, the awaited Savior. يَكُونُ مَا تُرِيدُونَ. The Imam says, what you have been waiting for will happen. Then the Imam goes on to describe these people. He says, you know what they're like? He says, إِذَا جَاءُوا لَمْ يُعْرَفُوا. They're the kind of people that when they walk into a place, no one recognizes them. وَإِذَا رَحَلُوا لَمْ يُفْتَقَدُوا. And if they leave, no one misses them. Because again, no one recognizes them. إِذَا مَرَضُوا لَمْ يُعَادُوا. When they get sick, no one goes to visit them. وَإِذَا خَطَبُوا لَمْ يُزَوَّجُوا. When they go to propose to someone, the family of the girl will say, who are you? We don't know who you are. إِذَا خَطَبُوا لَمْ يُزَوَّجُوا. This is a consolation for all the brothers who are trying to get married and no one recognizes them, as well as the sisters. As well as the sisters who sometimes I hear from them saying that, you know, it's not happening, pray for me, I want to get married and whatnot. Because on the other side, you have sisters who actually literally advertise themselves. Someone told me that in some cultures, I don't want to name names, in some cultures, the family forces the girl to take off the hijab, to beautify herself, to wear cosmetics, so that she finds someone who eventually desires her and proposes to her. But the one who chooses to refrain from this entire contaminated world, and as a result, suffers a certain degree of neglect for a short period of time, don't worry. Don't worry. إِن شِئْتَ أَلَّا تُعْرَفْ فَافْعَلْ. That's better for you. The one who will eventually come and marry you, or the one you will eventually find who will accept you as a man, right? Inshallah will be the right one. It'll be the one who marries you for all the right reasons, as opposed to for your looks and your chiseled chin and your jawline and your hairline and whatnot. So the Imam says, فَإِن خَطَبُوا أو إِذَا خَطَبُوا لَمْ يُزَوَّجُوا. So I want to sum up with this. How I mentioned last night that Islam tells us what the disease is. It diagnoses the disease. It also provides solutions to the problem and treatment for the disease, and gives it to you as well, right? Which is the ultimate medical treatment, where everything is a one-stop shop. Islam tells us that this is a potential disease, but if kept in check, it's okay, it's good. But we all desire to be recognized. We all desire to be respected. We all desire to have status in this world. Islam has a solution for that. What is it? I'll mention two ahadith. Maybe we'll leave the rest for tomorrow, inshallah. One hadith says, I believe by Imam Musa ibn Ja'far salawatullahi alayh, in which the Imam says, من أراد عزا بلا عشيرة وهيبة بلا سلطان وغنى بلا مال فليخرج من ذل معصية الله إلى عز طاعته. You want status and honor and recognition and respect without being a person of prestige, a person of authority, a person who's famous and whatnot? Number one. Number two, وَغِنًى بِلَا مَالٍ. Ghina is self-sufficiency. Ghina is feeling that you're in a sound state of financial affairs, right? You could be a trillionaire and still feel poor. But you could be someone on an average income but feel happy for what you have. So if you want status without authority, money without great wealth, and you want honor without having a posse and an entourage and a tribe that looks after you and stands up for you and protects you if you're ever in trouble, فَلْيَخْرُجْ, this person who desires all of these things, the way to get there is to leave the space where sin and transgression is taking place, to abandon those old ways that are mired with the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, min dhulli ma'siyatillah, the humiliation of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and enter the honor and the izz of what? Of ta'atillah, of being obedient toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is another subject about how connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what allows you to receive honor and respect. We have plenty of narrations about that, plenty of stories, but I want to move on. The next way to become a person of status and respect and honor is what? I'll give you a couple of references and addresses. The first one is Ziyarat al-Jami'ah. In this ziyarah, we address the Imams of the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam and say to them what? وَلَكُمُ الْمَوَدَّةُ الْكَامِلَةُ. To you belongs true love. Look at the companions of Imam Hussain. Look at the likes of Amr ibn al-Hamiq al-Khuza'i and Muslim ibn Abdullah al-Majashi'i and Bashir al-Hadrami and all of the other companions that we discussed over the 10 nights. That is true love, when you're willing to give your life for the memory of someone else, for the name of someone else, just to uphold their remembrance. You're willing to die for them. لَكُمُ الْمَوَدَّةُ الْكَامِلَةُ. Then the Imam says, وَالْجَاهُ الْعَظِيمُ. To you belongs the greatest of all status. It belongs to them. And I don't need to present examples to show how true status belongs to Rasulullah. It belongs to the prophets of God. It belongs to the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam. So, you want status? Connect with them. An even clearer reference for this is in Ziyarat Ashura. What do we say? Allahumma ja'alni indaka wajihan bil Hussain alayhi salam fi dunya wal akhirah. Oh Allah, give me honor and status and respect with you. With you. Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam says in one hadith, Ma alayka idha dhammaka an-nas wa kunta 'inda Allahi mamduha. Who cares if people disparage you and attack you and criticize you and make a mockery out of you if you are praised with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? عند الله ممدوحة, which probably means one of two things. Either the angels keep praising you to Allah, those who are tasked with sending messages and reporting back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they keep going back to God and praise this individual. Or it could mean that God himself praises you. And we have a hadith about that. Inna Allah yubahi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks with pride about certain individuals who do certain things, which is another subject for another lecture. Allah praises you. Who cares about everybody else? Anyway, so the Imam says that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises you, do you even care about other people? A very simple example of this, and I'll wrap up, is when you go to parents who have children in school, every once in a while they get invited to a play, right? They go to the play where their son or daughter plays a certain role, or they sing a song, or they do something like that, right? And what happens is when you go as a father, as a mother, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If your daughter or son steps on the stage, do they care about what other people are saying? Do they care if other people are looking at them or not? If other people are happy with their performance or not? All they care about is their parent. That's why they keep watching their parent. They want their parent to clap and cheer. They want their parent to say, you're doing a good job. That's beautiful. Keep at it. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, keep at it, you're doing a good job, does anything else matter? When the Imam of my time says, may Allah bless you, what a beautiful act you just did, does anything else matter? Absolutely not. And so, the quickest way, the best way, the ultimate way of acquiring honor and respect في الدنيا والآخرة, not just in the afterlife, is to connect with Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. روحي فداه اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. Even those who try to acquire honor by serving the other members of the Ahlulbayt, it's just not the same. It's on a whole other level. Imam Hussain alayhi salam is different. That's why the servants of Imam Hussain, the sincere servants of Imam Hussain, are so honored and respected. That's why those who devote their lives to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, that's why those who do ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, these are all manifestations of how to connect with Imam al-Hussein. قُلْ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Imran, إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ. If you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tell them, O Messenger, meaning truly love God, فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ. Then follow me. If you love God and follow me, Allah will then love you. Which means the greatest prize we could ever wish for is, number one, it's an incredible privilege to love Imam al-Hussein. إذا أراد الله بعبد الخير قذف في قلبه حب الحسين. That is an unfathomable privilege. But you know what's even better than that? Is when Imam al-Hussein loves you back. And we know, you might ask, well, how do I know? We know there are metrics, there are ways with which we can figure out whether Imam al-Hussein loves me or not. One of those is found in this verse. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ. When you follow me, God will love you. You follow Imam al-Hussein, God will love you. You visit Imam al-Hussein, God loves you. Imam al-Hussein loves you. You serve Imam al-Hussein in the Husayniyah, in the masjid, whether it be with your physical strength, as these wonderful youth, may Allah bless them, from AKY, serving Imam al-Hussein. They hold this majlis annually simply to serve Imam al-Hussein. They didn't say, oh, we already had the 10 nights of Muharram, or there's going to be Arba'een coming up. No. I want to be able to serve Imam al-Hussein. And if I couldn't do this as part of another group, I will make my own group. And I'll do whatever I can. No matter how seemingly menial, no matter how, even if people disrespect me. We've seen this happen, right? In majalis, where the patrons and the audience members, sometimes it's too cramped and the space is not big enough and it's hot or whatever. And so people get cranky, people get angry, and they lash out against these volunteers. But they couldn't care less. Why? Because for the sake of Imam al-Hussein, even if I'm humiliated, I'm honored in his eye. And so I don't care. In fact, the more I'm humiliated for the sake of Abu Abdullah, the better. Because the higher the pain, the bigger the gain. The more I have to suffer as a result of my service to Imam al-Hussein, the better it is. I'll conclude with this. Somebody once came to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Listen to the way the hadith is phrased is interesting. جاء أحد أصحاب أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام بعد أمد بعيد. So the Imam had not seen this man for a long time. وقد أثر عليه الكبر. He looked visibly old. So clearly the Imam hadn't seen him in a long time. وكان يتجلد في المشي. Which means that he looked old, but he was walking with effort. He was, trying to exert strength. فرآه أمير المؤمنين سلام الله عليه فقال له يا هذا لقد أثر عليك الشيب. You look really old. Your hair is gone all gray. May our hair turn gray in the service of the Imam of our time. He said to him, you look so old. قال في طاعتك يا أمير المؤمنين. Yes, I've grown old, but it's in your obedience, in your service. That's what I've been up to. How about you? That's what I've been doing. في طاعتك يا أمير المؤمنين. The Imam said to him, أراك تتجلد. I see you exerting effort when you walk. He said, على أعدائك يا أمير المؤمنين. Yes, I exert effort against your enemies. I'll do whatever it takes. So the Imam then said to him, أرى فيك بقية. But I see you still have it in you. MashaAllah. From these statements, you still have it in you. You've got some strength. قال فداء لك يا أمير المؤمنين. Yes, whatever strength I've got left, I've saved up for you. Don't worry about me. Remember what Muslim al-Majash'i said? لا عليك يا أمير المؤمنين إن ذلك في ذات الله لقليل. May we, inshallah, and our children and our children's children grow up in the service of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Spend every waking moment of our lives trying to think about how to earn a living so that I could have money, so that I could look after my family, so that I could then spend my spare time in the service of Imam al-Hussein, so that I could save up, so that I could go to ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, so that I could have free time and hold as many majalis as possible, so that I could buy a bigger house, so that I could hold a majlis. Like a friend told me last year, I looked at his car, I got into the car, it was a nice, flashy BMW, whatever. I said to him, MashaAllah, nice car. He said, Sayyid, Wallahi, I bought it so that I could go to ziyarat Arba'een with the car. He said, that was my intention. Align everything with Imam al-Hussein and you will have the greatest jah, the greatest status, the greatest position of prestige in this dunya as well as the next. They brought the sacred head of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein toward the palace of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. آجرك الله بقية الله يا حجة ابن الحسن. The first thing they did was they hung the sacred head of our master and our Imam with a rope and they left it dangling by the gates of the palace. Imagine these women and children. I can't even begin to imagine what they went through. Historians do say that Sakina and Lady Zainab, they had the task of trying to obstruct the view of the women and children so they don't see all of this. But there was one person who definitely saw the head, and that was the ambassador of the Roman Byzantine Empire, Al-Khwarizmi, who is a Sunni author and one of the narrators of the Maqtal of Imam al-Hussein. He writes this in his Maqtal. It goes back almost 1,000 years. He says there that the Roman ambassador was sitting next to Yazid while Yazid ordered the tablecloth to be put and the food to be presented and the delicacies to be served, all while having the head of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein in a bowl right in front of him. He then began to drink. He was already intoxicated by power and youth. He was intoxicated by his victory, and he was intoxicated by wine. He had the head of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein in front of him, laughing hysterically. When the Roman ambassador said to him, "Whose head is this?" He said, "What's it to you? Don't worry about that." He said, "No, I want to report back to the Byzantine emperor and tell him about the victory that you've achieved so that he could write to you and congratulate you. So I want some more details. Whose victory are you celebrating? Whose head do you have right there in front of you on the dinner table?" He said to him, "Hada Ra'sul Hussein." He said, "Which Hussein?" He said, "Al-Hussein ibn Ali, Al-Hussein ibn Fatima." He said, "Hussein, the son of Fatima, bintu Nabiyyikum, the daughter of your prophet?" He said, "Yes, it is." So the man, the Roman ambassador who was a Christian, he retorted, he looked at Yazid, he said to him, I am a Christian man. Some have said that I'm a descendant of one of the disciples of Jesus. You should see how people come and take from the dust under my feet, because I have a lineage that traces its way back to one of the 12 disciples of Isa alayhi salam. And yet this is what you do to the grandson of your own prophet. Tabban lakum walidinikum. May you be cursed along with your religion, with whatever you believe in. How dare you do this? Yazid was insulted. He said, you insult me in my own court, in my own palace. I want you to kill him and behead him right now. When the executioner approached him, he said, now that you want to execute me and behead me, this explains the dream that I had last night, where I saw your prophet come in my dream and say, tomorrow you will be my honored guests. I thought to myself, I'm not even a Muslim. Why would the messenger of Islam say that tomorrow you'll be my guest? And what's going to happen tomorrow? Now it all makes sense. Allow me to do one last thing. He threw himself on the head of Aba Abdullah. He embraced the head and said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And he was killed while embracing the head of Aba Abdullah. I say to this Roman ambassador, may Allah bless you for what you did, but you couldn't stand to look at the severed head of the son of Fatima, even for a moment. So I could only imagine what happened to the daughters of Aba Abdullah when Yazid became angry at the words that Lady Zainab uttered in his court. So how did he release his anger? He took out that scepter and began beating the teeth of Aba Abdullah. Ya hilalan lamma istatamma kamala زاغه خسفه فأبدى غروبا لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.